You just finished dinner, your plate is clean, your stomach is full, and yet your hand is already reaching for something else. Maybe it's the chips on the counter, maybe it's the half-open bag of cookies you told yourself you'd save for tomorrow, maybe it's nothing in particular. You're just opening the fridge and staring into it like it might have a different answer this time. You're not hungry, you know you're not hungry, and yet here you are. The real reason this happens is far stranger than willpower, or weakness, or any of the things you've probably blamed yourself for. It starts about 12,000 years ago, but to understand it properly you have to go back even further, to a version of you that never knew what a dinner plate was. Your earliest ancestors ate nothing like you do. There were no meals, no schedules, no breakfast, lunch, or dinner. There was only the hunt, the find, and the eat as much as you can right now because you have no idea when the next opportunity is coming. Anthropologist Herman Poncer, who studies modern hunter-gatherer groups at the Hadza tribe in Tanzania, found something that upended almost everything nutritionists believed. Despite walking 10 to 14 kilometers a day, the Hadza didn't burn dramatically more calories than sedentary office workers in the West. Their bodies adjusted. They compensated. They held on to energy like it was precious, because for most of human history it was. Your body is not a machine that burns what you put in and cleanly discards the rest. Your body is an ancient survival engine that learned one rule above all others: store what you can, when you can, because tomorrow is never guaranteed. That rule is written into your biology at a level so deep that no amount of modern knowledge can simply overwrite it. When food enters your system, your brain doesn't just register calories. It triggers something called the dopamine reward cascade. You feel a rush of pleasure, not because your body is happy or healthy, but because your brain is rewarding you for finding energy, for surviving, for doing the one thing that kept your ancestors alive. Neuroscientist Kent Berridge at the University of Michigan spent decades separating what he called wanting from liking. They're not the same thing. Liking is the brief pleasure you feel while eating. Wanting is the relentless pull that makes you reach for the bag in the first place. Wanting is driven by dopamine. And here's what's strange. The wanting system doesn't turn off when you're full. It runs on a different circuit entirely. That's why you can feel genuinely satisfied and still want more. Those two states don't cancel each other out. They can exist at the same time, in the same body, in the same moment, which is exactly what happens when you're standing in front of the fridge at 10 p.m. telling yourself you shouldn't be there. But the story gets stranger. The food you're reaching for isn't random. It is almost always high in fat, high in sugar, or high in salt, sometimes all three. You didn't develop this preference by accident, you were shaped by it. In the ancestral environment, fat meant dense energy, sugar meant ripe fruit, safe to eat, full of calories. Salt meant electrolytes, minerals your body loses and desperately needs to replace. Your brain developed specific reward pathways for each of these. Finding them wasn't just pleasurable, it was survival critical. Now take that ancient wiring and drop it into a world where every grocery store is engineered to hit all three of those pathways at once, in the same product, at the same time, at a cost of almost nothing. Food scientist David Kessler, the former commissioner of the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, spent years investigating how the food industry designs products specifically to exploit this wiring. He called it the bliss point, the precise combination of fat, sugar, and salt that maximizes reward without triggering fullness. That's not accidental. The people who engineer these products know exactly what they're doing. They're not making food. They're making stimuli for your ancient brain. And your ancient brain does not know the difference. It cannot know the difference. It never had to evolve a defense against this, because this situation never existed before. For 300,000 years, food was scarce, hard to find, and quickly exhausted. There was no such thing as a vending machine in a Paleolithic landscape. This is what researchers call an evolutionary mismatch. Your hardware was built for one world. You are now running it in a completely different one. And there's a second mismatch layered right underneath the first. Your fullness signal doesn't arrive instantly. It takes roughly 15 to 20 minutes after you've eaten enough for your gut to produce enough peptide YY and GLP-1, the satiety hormones, to reach your brain and tell it to stop. By then, if you're eating fast, you've already consumed far more than you needed. This lag wasn't a problem in the ancestral environment. Meals of whole food, tubers, meat, berries, required so much chewing and effort that 20 minutes was a natural pace. Eating quickly wasn't even an option. Now you can consume 1,200 calories in 8 minutes. Your hormones don't stand a chance, so you finish the plate before the signal arrives. And then, still riding the dopamine curve, your hand moves on its own. Not because you're broken, because you're exactly as your body was designed, in a world that no longer exists. Here is something that often surprises people. This doesn't affect everyone equally, and the reason why is deeply uncomfortable. Research by psychologist Tracy Mann at the University of Minnesota reviewed over 30 long-term studies on dieting and found that the majority of people who lose weight through restriction eventually regain it, and often more. The body interprets caloric restriction as famine. It responds by lowering your metabolic rate, increasing your hunger hormones, and making high-calorie food more rewarding than it was before you started dieting. The more you restrict, the louder the wanting system becomes. Your body fights you, methodically, biochemically. With the full force of 300,000 years of evolution that has one goal and one goal only, keep you alive by any means necessary, it does not understand that the famine isn't real. It doesn't know you're choosing to eat less. It only knows that less energy is coming in, and it responds accordingly. This is not an excuse to do nothing. Understanding why a thing happens is not the same as being powerless against it. But it does mean that the conversation about food and eating and bodies has been almost completely misdirected for decades. You were told this was a character problem, a motivation problem, a moral problem. It was never any of those things. It was a biology problem, a mismatch problem, an ancient brain in a modern world problem. The people who seem to eat without struggle, who stop naturally, who don't feel the pull, who leave food on their plate without effort, aren't more disciplined than you. Their hunger signaling tends to be calibrated more gently, or their environment is structured differently, or the mismatch between their ancient wiring and their modern food landscape happens to be smaller. That's it. None of this means you cannot change anything. Eating slowly gives your satiety hormones time to arrive. Reducing ultra-processed foods lowers the artificial intensity of the dopamine stimulus. Sleep deprivation measurably increases ghrelin, the hunger hormone, and decreases leptin, which suppresses it, so a single bad night shifts your biology toward overeating the next day. Small changes to environment matter more than willpower. Research shows that people eat less when they use smaller plates not because they decided to eat less, but because their ancient visual brain, which still estimates portion by visual cues rather than caloric content, simply registered a full plate as enough. The behavior changed because the cue changed, not because the person became more disciplined. The system can be nudged, but only once you understand what the system actually is. Tonight, when dinner ends and your hand reaches for something else, you'll know what's happening. It's not weakness, it's not failure. It's the oldest voice in your body, still doing the job it was built to do, still scanning for energy in a world of scarcity that vanished 10,000 years ago. The reach isn't a flaw in your design, it's proof that your design worked, just well enough to carry your ancestors all the way to you. Subscribe to Doodle Explains It for more explanation videos.
Don't forget to subscribe to the channel.